Hello everyone, we hope you are doing all very well today. In this video, we will share with you information about the research paperwork, a conceptual framework for trust in standardized assessment, commercial, quasi-market, and national systems made by Melanie Aaron. Well, standardization refers to the various aspects of an assessment: the content, the questions, the method of administration, the procedure for scoring individual test items, and the norms to interpret overall results. They are designed so that the questions, conditions for administering them, the scoring procedures and interpretations of the learner knowledge and skills are consistent and are also administered and scored in a predetermined, standardized manner, said Topham in 1999. So, how high-stakes tests have consequences for various actors? Well, assessment typically have consequences which can be high stakes for those involved. The consequences can be formal and intended, such as when the results of the standardized assessments are used for purposes of students' university admissions or qualifications, teacher appraisal, school inspection, or school-level performance-based accountability. The standardized assessments often also have informal and unintended consequences when various actors use the test and the outcomes of the test for purposes for which they were not designed for. And McLean and Pfeiffer said that, for example, point to schools using achievement tests to select students to talented and gift programs. These consequences introduce both a reliance and risk which necessitate trust. For example, students rely on exams to secure entry to the college or university of their choice. For teachers or school leaders who are held accountable for their students' outcomes, it's their reputation, job security, or school funding that is at stake. Those who use outcomes for decision making need to trust that the test provides them with an accurate and relevant information. Well, conceptualizing trust in a standardized assessment. Trust is particularly relevant for a standardized assessment for which results have high stakes, such as when the decisions are made about students' progressions and qualifications, or for the teachers and school accountability. As Gillespie said, trust is needed in relations that have an element of risk, where people have to rely on someone else's skills, knowledge, judgments, or actions, and where personal information of a sensitive nature needs to be shared as part of someone's role or maybe a responsibility, and for someone to be able to learn and develop. Risk and reliance on others necessitate trust, because without risk there is no need for trust.
Okay, I'm going to talk about national, quasi-market, and commercial systems. It has its unique approach to managing and trusting assessments. National assessment systems. First, let's look at national systems. In these systems, the big bosses in charge are the ones who found and manage the tests. Sometimes, the big decision makers, like the government, are the main ones making decisions, even if they let other groups such as school or expert committees handle some aspects. People trust these systems because they believe they are competent, benevolent, and honest. Generally, major organizations are highly respected because everything is centralized and transparent. This centralization of this helps address potential failures. When these groups play fair and represent their people, the trust the trust in those assessments increase in a very good way. Quasi-market systems. Next, we have quasi-market systems. In this, the government role is still present but less significant than before. The commission standardized tests and various providers compete for funding. In addition, trust in these systems is more indirect and multifaceted. It comes down to whether test creators are doing a good job and if schools and students have a say in choosing the test. Sometimes program leaders have rules they must follow, which can complicate the choice between options and make you question if what is said is real. Commercial market systems. Finally, let's talk about commercial market systems. In some private and international schools, for-profit or not-profit companies set their own rules and costs. People usually don't trust these systems so much because skipping tests doesn't have serious consequences. When tests are required, trust depends on whether the entities administering them handle them correctly and if the tests accurately reflect what students can actually do.
Well, macro-level source of trust. These perceptions refer to macro source of trust or confidence that the assessment system functions to provide a fair and honest outcome. An author explains how the concept of macro-level or system level trust is closely related to well-functioning institutions such as the function of legal, political, or economic bureaucratic systems and is set apart from the relationships between individuals and organizations discussed before. And in our case, is a function of we seem to be in charge of these assessments like exam bodies, test developers, special agencies for governments, and their use of assessment outcomes, whether they and their organizations have functioning institutional arrangement in place to ensure high quality use of assessment outcomes and prevent incompetent, corrupt, or otherwise harmful behaviors. Well, macro-level trust in national systems of assessment. Unstable government lack of cross-party consensus or party politics may mean that examinations change with each change in government provides an example of how the change in the use of assessment during the pandemic led to a number of trust issues, particularly among teachers working in small towns and rural communities in Ireland. These teachers saw their relationship with parents and students strained when the government overturned an initial decision to use teachers' assessment for student qualifications. Macro-level trust in quasi-markers for standardized assessment. A study by Simpson and Baer, for example, found that participants recognized the perverse educational effects that differential standards between boards may bring, potentially favoring certain examination boards over others because they offer an easy option and are like to our better grades. For example, exams in traditional subjects were more evaluated and considered to be more informative than those in less traditional subjects. Macro-level trust in a commercial market. In a system where private providers are suppliers of assessments, there is the risk that attaining standards are driven by profit potential rather than quality. Private providers may have little incentive to learn about different school contents and young people's learning when designing assessment, and this can impact the integrity of the process. When assessment outcomes fail to provide an accurate score for competence, it damages at first the trust of further education providers or employers who use this information for selection.
Bandura defines agency as the capacity to exercise control over the nature and quality of one's life. More recent work describes agency in relation to the context in which individuals and collectives function and their disposition and ability to interact with and shape their context proactively. This discussion has allowed to agency over test outcomes when referring to the option of choosing a preferred test. In these systems, students, teachers, and leaders of the school have comparatively have more options in choosing a test that fits their interests, preferences for test taking, or time needed to prepare for a positive outcome than they would in national systems. Such choice will reduce their vulnerability to potential harmful effects of testing. Choice enhances the potential benevolence of the entire system, particularly when there are wider safeguards in place. For the quality and integrity of the system in competition is prevented from driving down as standards explained before. The discussion about agency of the people who are being tested reaches the initial definition, which should be considered the risks and different situations that require trust in the context of a standardized assessment. The level of vulnerability and agency will vary according the individual potential effects such as economic and social. Another important point is that failing a test may also have more implications for those from disadvantaged backgrounds who rely on a positive context. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the problems with standardized testing, causing a great deal of public outcry over whether this type of assessment was fair or even accurate. The cracks in the trust become evident by simply swapping traditional examinations for the teacher assessment and the statistical modeling approach, which led to a huge difference between outcomes and environments on the middle of the class of students versus those who are resources backgrounds. Finally, the non-informal dialogue regarding the assessment processes is necessary to improve agency and informed decision-making among all actors. By promoting more understanding of how assessment works, students, teachers, and educational administrators will be able to steer the standard known pitfalls. Lastly, the paper argues that we need a conceptual framework to re-legitimize high stakes. Standardized testing is a process not only by looking at test security, but to practice more.